Hello and welcome to another great edition of Beyond the Hype. And you know it's always great. If you want proof, just look at past episodes of the show. We always deliver on this show. Listen, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. And as always, I have an important topic with the perfect guest expert to talk about it. Yes, it's election 2024. The stage is set. We know who the Republican presidential nominee and vice presidential nominee is, and we know who the Democratic nominee and vice presidential nominee is. The table is now set for an unprecedented election experience as we move into election 2024. Trump versus Harris, Vance versus Walz, and obviously this is a critical time for our country. My guest today, though, is going to talk about, listen, there's four voting blocks, broadly speaking, that are critical. There are those on the right, there's those on the left, and then there are moderates in the middle. But actually the most important voting group are the disengaged, because elections swing on to what degree the disengaged voter gets off the bench to vote and what team they decide to vote on when they do. No matter what team they decide to vote on, the disengaged voter actually has an outsized impact on the outcomes and the policies and the future of our country. And my guest today has built a business and an app that's dedicated to engaging the disengaged voter, not only in presidential elections. We're talking about being engaged down the ballot year-round for those elections that are often more important because they directly impact you in your local towns and communities than the presidential election, as important as that is. So everyone, welcome to the show, Wen-Kuni Ceant, co-founder of Politicking.
Thank you so much, Alfred, for welcoming me to the show. I am so excited to join Beyond the Hype with you today. And as you said, it is a critical time in politics today. So I'm excited to chat with you about all things politics.
So listen, I always, when my guests come on and we have a relationship, I'm always transparent with my audience. Wen-Kuni's one of my favorite people because she's one of my mentees. And we got to know each other because of our shared association with Pharrell Williams' Black Ambition initiative that gives the Black Ambition Prize of $1 million and other prizes to Black entrepreneurs. I think we're going into our fourth year this year with the program. And I'm one of the mentors in the mentorship side. And Politicking and Wen-Kuni was assigned to, I think, my very first cohort of
That's
entrepreneurs. Right. And so since then, we've stayed in touch. We just saw each other a couple of weeks ago at the New Media Ventures Summit in San Francisco when I asked you to come on the show. Once we knew who the Vice President Harris vice presidential running mate would be, and here we are. So, so you already know, I think she's brilliant. In fact, I know she's brilliant. And I think her company is doing something that's really important and amazing. Again, not just as an entrepreneurial venture, but as a venture that's truly impacting what we're experiencing as voters and as citizens. So with that said, Wen-Kuni, talk about your journey to launching Politicking. How did you get to that? And then also talk about what Politicking actually is.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Alfred, first off, I couldn't have put it any better myself in terms of how we met. And that is part of our journey. In 2018, my co-founder and I, Jordan Wilson, really had a conversation right around the times of the election, actually. And we really were thinking about a lot of different things and wanted to understand why people that were educated just didn't have the best understanding fundamentally of elections. We felt like civic literacy was at an all-time low, particularly in Black and Brown communities. And so we wanted to be the change that we wanted to see in the community, quite frankly. And so after surveying friends, family, different community members, we realized it wasn't a me problem, it was a we problem. And so we banded together in an effort to fix that issue. And really the issue that we address via politicking, which is a social political platform that really addresses the civic disengagement that we see riddled in our communities through information. And what we decided to do was to create an app so that you could find all of the electoral information that you need from the touch of your palm. We know that Black and Brown people, and we know that young people are turning more and more to technology as a solution to our many problems. And so we thought, what better way to address this really dated problem and this really dated system we participate in each November and sometimes intermittently? And so that's why we decided to create Politicking. Politicking is really something where you can put your address in and we're able to produce who currently represents you, who's running to be on the ballot, information on amendments and referendums. And one of the things that we're even working on, Alfred, that we're really excited about is the development of an estimated wait time tool that would be able to predict how long it will take you to vote at your polling precinct. And so that's been super exciting because we thought, if you can do that at Disney, why can't you do it for one of the most important decisions of your life? And so that is what we're working on. You can download us in the Apple Store right now. You can check us out on our website, on social media, and we'll get more into that later. But that's our goal. That's our mission. Is, politics are complicated, but with politicking, it doesn't have to be.
Obviously, we're here because of the election to talk about politicking's mission of engaging disengaged voters. But I do want to give some shine to the fact that how we met is because this is a business idea that gained traction. Again, obviously, you are a Black ambitionist.
Yes.
You were pitching your business at New Venture Summit. This business has traction. This idea has traction not only from a civic, need standpoint, but I mean, for example, your point is well made that most people, well, now I mean, now we can say pretty much every generation, but certainly the younger you are, you're accustomed to getting your news, your information, your education in the palm of your hand.
Mhm.
That the way my generation and older went to the television to get whatever news and information or entertainment they wanted. Now it's in your hand, and that if you're really going to be serious about educating and engaging voters, yeah, they may end up watching CNN or Fox or whatever, but usually what you choose to engage with from a content standpoint starts with what you're willing to interact with on your phone. And when I first became your mentor through Black Ambition and I downloaded the app, it just made sense to me as someone, even as a journalist and an educated, engaged voter who is not always all that conscious of, well, who is this person that's running, and the school board and the city council, and this we're filling in a vacant congressional seat, and I'm getting all this campaign paraphernalia, and of course they're saying their positions, but it's not the same thing as being able to go in one place and say, okay, all right, I feel like I know what I'm going to do when I roll over into the booth.
Yep.
So talk to me about your journey to raise money to gain investment in this idea that sounds like a good civic idea, but also you're trying to you're getting traction from this is really a viable uh, social enterprise, if you will, a civic enterprise, but an enterprise nonetheless.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, Alfred. A lot of people, when they first hear of us, they just assume that, we're social do-gooders, and we are. But there's also a business model here. And what a lot of people don't know and realize is that the political advertising realm is a $20 billion industry, right? We see it on our TVs, we take it in on the radio, we see it in people's front yards when they have the little signs, but we weren't seeing that as much in the digital marketplace. And so we really understand that as we're continuing to shift into this technological age, that civic digital space is the future. And so we wanted to give elected officials the opportunity to actually be able to advertise on an application like ours, that really they're meeting their constituents where they are. And so we are able to geo target those political ads. So based on your address, you're only going to see things that apply to you, right? And so that's extremely exciting. And also, we find that it gives people an opportunity to connect directly with these constituents. So, whether it's a digital sign, whether it's a video, you're able to see and really see that on the application in real and live time. And that is definitely a lucrative industry. The other ways in which politicking is able to continue to generate revenue is through our live events. One of the things that my mentor, Alfred, actually had suggested to me at the time was, hey, you guys are doing a bunch of really incredible things. And actually, I think we were at Black Men Excel, which he had invited me as his guest. And I was like, well, Alfred, I don't know if I should come. I'm not a black male. He was like, come, you should see how a conference works. And that was a year prior to us putting on our inaugural conference. And so I thank you for putting that, mustard seed in us so that we could really understand that a lot of the times money is made through those live events. People have a desire to want to learn about politics, and they also have a desire to want to fellowship with people that are in their community and people that are like minded. And so that's just one of the many other ways that we're able to generate revenue. But to answer your question, Alfred, the journey fundraising has been arduous, right? As Black women, we know that we receive less than 2% of venture capital in the space. And so that is a challenging number. And it's one that I'm afraid to say is very true. Oftentimes, we're competing against companies that may not even be as fully developed as we are, but because the leadership looks different, the checks are different. And so that's something that we've certainly had to encounter, and it's been an uphill battle. But fortunately for us, organizations like New Media Ventures have seen the light, and we're actually one of their portfolio companies. And so that is just one of the organizations that's really looked into us, looked into our backgrounds, looked into our financials, and bought into our ideas. And our hope, Alfred, is that more and more organizations, more and more investors, both VCs and angels, will continue to do that. And finally, with the technology that we're developing for the estimated wait time tools, it's our goal that we're able to work with, city officials and city governments to license that type of technology so that in every city throughout the United States of America, they can have access to the types of tools that we provide at Politicking. So we're always looking for investment, we're always looking to expand, and we're always looking for partnership. But we know that the technology that we're developing is special, and we're really, really honored to have some investors that have partnered along with us on that ride.
You know, first of all, my Beyond Hype audience already knows if I bring a guest on the show and they have an offer, the goal is for you either to take advantage of that offer or to spread the word about that offer. And this is the offer to really have a great opportunity to invest. So if you are an angel investor, you're in some area of venture capital, or people who are. Again, I'm not shy about saying, "Yep,
That's
invest
right.
in politicking because this, she is the real deal and your company is the real deal." The other thing I want to talk about, because in a way you laid it out, you're actually serving two constituencies. Obviously, you're serving disengaged voters at various levels of disengagement. There's the lightly disengaged, and that's me. I'm educated. I understand the political process, but I'm not always staying on top of what's literally happening
Mhm.
in the smaller down ballot elections. Um, but then there's the deeply disengaged, the people who don't vote, they never voted, they never thought they had a reason to vote, they've been overlooked, they've been sometimes intentionally disenfranchised. But you have that group. But then you also mentioned, those people who are seeking public office
Mhm.
across, across political parties, across the spectrum of political policy beliefs and agendas. And what I want to ask this question is, I just remember, maybe it was maybe around 2018 as well. It was definitely before the pandemic when there were hearings with the Facebooks. I think Mark Zuckerberg and other major tech leaders were sitting in front of Congress, and you could tell from the questions that they were being asked that we have an electorate that's largely not really digitally.
Savvy.
Yes, I was trying to find a nice way to say it. And again, I'm 64. I kind of lean into it, but I'm an aberration.
Mhm.
And you look at the typical age of certainly in national politics, Congress, senators. Yeah, there are younger, people, who are under the age of 40 or 50, but many of them are 65, 70, and they're analog native, they're not digitally native. And therefore, I would expect, and I guess I'm asking you, that there's an education process that goes on that's also important to the effectiveness of the electoral system for the people on the uh, candidate side, or those that desire to pursue elected office, to understand the power of digital marketing, digital advertising, digital engagement with the electorate. What has that been like for you in terms of the both the revenue implications, but the larger goal of this is how you got to meet people where they are.
You're right, Alfred. We serve many different communities, and elected officials are one of those communities that we serve. Not
Mhm.
only are they interested in being able to advertise on the platform, but the data that we're able to procure from our audience that really says, hey, young people are interested in education, young people are interested in national security, or young people aren't really interested in immigration. Whatever the answers that we're receiving from the clicks that we're getting and the algorithms that we're using, they are interested in that because, quite frankly, Alfred, it helps them to frame their campaigns. And so we're definitely doing servant leadership on that side as well. I think it's really exciting time to be able to work firsthand with elected officials, and not just elected officials, right? Thought leaders. We've had everyone on our platform from Bakari Sellers to Damon Dash to Senator Dick Durbin. I mean, it's been a really wide ranging, and even Vice President Kamala Harris tweeted at us when we were first launching, and that was inspiring as a Howard alum myself. And so we have really been able to tap into really a wide array of elected officials, thought leaders, cultural mavens, and we know all of these people affect the way people think. So it's not just about the elected officials sometimes, but also the camps, the environmentalists that surround them, the pop culture icons that surround them, because more and more we're seeing, Alfred, that social media and pop culture dictate a lot of what we're seeing in the political arena. And so politicking is acutely aware of that.
That's another reason I was excited about, when we first got to know each other, and excited about your platform and your mission, because there is really no true engaging us as a nation. Um, for example, politicking can't just be a basic utilitarian act or app, excuse me, that says hit this link to know who's running in the next. There has to be an engagement with the larger experience of being an American citizen that isn't very much shaped by what the operative word in popular culture is popular. It's not just entertainment and celebrity. It's those things that are shaping our collective experience as American citizens.
Mhm.
And so, this idea that you're not just talking about, campaign managers and candidates. You are talking about Damon Dash and Dick Durbin and again, people in politics professionally, but people who influence and are influenced by politics.
Yeah.
Um, you talk about the traditional, like the Rock the Vote. Rock the Vote wasn't driven by elected officials. They were driven by people in popular culture who other people will say, I will at least listen to you, even if I don't agree with what you're saying. And so your smooth integration of that reality into the politicking app and business model is one of the things I find most exciting about that model.
Thank
And
you.
I'm not surprised, but I'm still impressed. Say
Thank you
that.
so much. And we're excited about that. Unfortunately, like we saw a lot of movements like Rock the Vote die. And so
Mhm.
our goal is to really revitalize communities like that where Black and Brown people can get excited about politics. And it's not only about national politics, like you mentioned, Alfred. We are focused on down ballot elections as well. We're
Mhm.
focused on state elections as well because we know those are just as important. For example, just a few days ago, we saw Cori Bush was ousted in the Democratic primary. That's a big deal, right? It's not quite November, it's not quite the presidential election, but that is a big deal. And we want to remind everyday Americans why things like that matter. We want to draw the link and connection. And I think it's also important, especially as we talk about Black and Brown culture specifically, when we look into that Cori Bush election, for example, it's important for people to know Cori Bush was ousted by actually another a Black man, actually. And so like a
Mm.
lot of times people think, oh, it's a racist thing. Not necessarily. There's a lot of nuance and dynamics even within the Black community. We're not monolithic. We don't all think the same and believe the same way. And so politicking is a space where we understand people are red, blue, and purple, which is our color, everything in the middle. And we're proud of that. And we're proud of being a space that allows for different ideologies, different opinions, and different opportunities to really share thought.
The thing that you bring to mind, even as you lay all that out, and again, I'm talking about the down ballot local elections that too often, unless there's some huge controversial issue going on in a city or a town or a state, people don't really pay attention to until after the fact when they're being affected. And so you think of some of the things that were some of the biggest issues coming out of the pandemic, education and how that is delivered now that we know virtual and remote is changed the nature of education in ways that it hasn't been changed in over a century. How policing is done is these are all things that yes, they are federal and national issues of conversation and debate, but they're executed on the ground locally. And so if you don't know that there's a sheriff's election in or a county that's actually going to have a more immediate impact on the approach to policing in your area, that's a down ballot conversation. That's a local conversation. And to your point, it's not as easy to um, uh, assess and analyze those issues just on race or party affiliation. That the nuances become a lot more localized when you're talking about your town or your city or your county or your state than the broader national conversation of red states versus blue states versus swing states. And again, that's why I believe that not only the app but the larger business model kind of speaks to the future of what it means to have an engaged citizenry. And I do want to get you to weigh in on this the other thing that you already touched on, which is civic education has been put on the back burner, if not totally off the stove, in most of public education. I'm of the age where I took U.S. history, and there was you learned about the branches of government, and you understood the difference between state and federal and local. And I came out of high school with a good basic understanding of how the system works, and now you really have two or three generations of people that, unless they had a reason to study political science, there's some people who follow politics the way other people follow sports, but the general population, you know, they don't understand the electoral college versus the popular vote, and oh, why did he win or she win when it should be the popular vote, and then there's real reasons for why representative government don't make popular vote practical, whether you agree with it or not. But a lot of it is people don't know, and because they don't know, they either act well. They're vulnerable to misinformation and disinformation, which we know in the age of social media is has been weaponized in many cases. But more importantly, once people really get frustrated, that's what leads to disengagement. When they say, "I don't understand, it doesn't make sense, it doesn't matter anymore," and I'm taking my vote and going home. And again, that's the most influential block of voters is the disengaged voter. So talk about the role of politicking, the importance of politicking's mission to provide the basic civic education that too many Americans just don't are not getting anymore.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Alfred. So we have a section on the app called Info that we just run through that basic civic information because a lot of people they haven't gotten that education since 5th grade when they had that initial preliminary course on the three branches of government. And a lot of times people don't even realize that. The other thing that we're trying to help bolster is name recognition. I know that the Say My Name movement was really created to commemorate people that have been, fallen through police brutality. When I think about it and when I reimagine it, we have to say the elected officials' names. And that is what we're trying to get them to do via politicking. So, not only are we going to explain to you what the executive, legislative, and judicial branch is, not only are we going to explain to you what the Supreme Court is, how people get federally appointed, and how that's a lifetime appointment. We're also going to explain to you what a mayor does and why that's important, and what a superintendent does, and what a circuit court judge does, because those things are just as important. You're in Chicago, Alfred. You guys talk a lot about aldermans. That's not something that we have here in Washington, D.C. And so understanding those little nuances in governments, the different names, that's important. And we really want to make sure that people have a resounding confidence when they come in to the polls to vote. One of the reasons why we started politicking was we knew that people were walking out of the polling precinct feeling like they had failed the biggest exam of their life. And we wanted to eradicate that feeling, Alfred. We didn't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, I had no idea what was going on in there besides the presidential candidates. That's a bad feeling to have, because the names that you're checking, the boxes that you're circling, they do have an effect on your taxes. They do have an effect on where your children go to school. They even have an effect on if that pothole gets filled in your front street or not. So we wanted to draw the understanding from people that are voting to these real life issues. And we do that in myriad of ways. The other way we do it is through social media, because we know that's something we can push out in real time. And so, even earlier this week, we had a wonderful conversation with a political commentator, comedian, and attorney. Her name is Elizabeth Booker Houston. And it was a resounding conversation because we were able to talk Monday knowing that Tuesday the VP choice would be announced. And we were able to talk about what that might mean for this election. And that's exciting. So, the opportunity to connect with people directly in real time is not one that we take for granted at politicking.
And now I would kind of want to shift the gears to talk about the present and the future in terms of the broader, not only the political landscape, but the future of us um, as a voting people. I mean, all of us as voters, regardless of political affiliation, left, right, middle, progressive, liberal, conservative, whatever. But this idea of an engaged, confident, um, uh, educated voter, which is the ideal that well, I'll speak for myself, someone who actually believes in the ideal of what the country is trying to become as a relatively young country in the world. That I think is just a worthwhile honorable goal. Um, but I want to kind of get your thoughts around, how can I say this, around what are the kind of positive benefits for all of us as a society of having a truly confident and educated and engaged citizenry, and how important is that? And I'm going to put my little 2 cents in. My belief is that as we move forward, not only in politics but in entertainment, it, that the ability to discern what is authentically, credibly true, or whether you're doing the difference between an AI generated image or a real photo, whether the voice you're listening to on the phone is you're actually your niece who needs help, or it's a clone voice, that this blurring of what's real and what's not is making it even harder, and we've seen this in the last couple of election cycles, to tell what to believe and what not to believe as we try to make voting choices that are true to what we think is important, but it's based on actual factual information. Now, misinformation and disinformation goes back to the beginning of time in terms of elections and man governing man. But one of the things that I have a certain hopeful passion for what you're doing is to have some reliable sources where you can say, listen, we're not telling you to go this way or that way, but what we're telling you is what's here is you can believe it, and you're going to talk directly to the candidate. You're not going to, you know, hear from, your ability to bridge that wall between an electorate that's counting on media outlets that they may trust or not trust, and candidates, especially local candidates, who don't have the money to do the big
Yep.
spend. They're literally trying to meet people where they are, and then often there's a big vast gap in between where lots of misperceptions, misinformation, disinformation. I'm going a long way around about what do you see in terms of what the future will be for the typical voter that has to try to figure out, am I voting in my best interest or am I not, or do I even know? And if I can't tell, what's the use of even trying either way?
I mean, the future is politicking, right? I think politicking organizations like politicking, one of the things that we do that I think is so novel and something I enjoy as a user as well as CEO is I like inviting elected officials on, and then the last 10 to 15 minutes, we open up the floor for questions from the community. And they know that that's going to happen. And so essentially, it's like a town hall, but for people who may not be able to get there in person, and then it's something that they can be held accountable with, later when and if they are elected. And so we allow our community to ask questions. We have IG lives every Monday at 6 p.m. usually, and we allow our users, our listeners, to come on there and say, hey, Mayor Messam, what have you done for me the last 3 months in terms of education or in terms of economic equity and opportunity? And I ask those questions as the moderator. I ask, hey, you have a question from one of your constituents about this and this. We also ask people who are running for office these same questions, because it's just as important as that they start to get their feet wet with understanding that you are a public servant. We say elected officials a lot, but I think the best term to use is really public servant. It's your role, it's your duty to serve this community that you're elected by. And so, in that comes a great degree of accountability. And when you say, what does the future look like? Alfred, I think the answer is increased rates of accountability. Being able to touch in with your public servants, with your elected officials at the drop of a dime, being able to have those types of open door policies and open door conversations that I think too often are missing in this extremely convoluted political cycle right now.
Yeah, I think you just make such an important point, and this applies not only to voting or being politically engaged, but I tell people, even when you're managing staff, and they want something, and you either can't give it to them, and they don't want, or you don't want to give it to them, or they want a policy change that you're not willing to change. And I always tell people, and it's true with parenting too, and I'm thinking about it with raising kids. Often the disconnect is not, you won't give me what you want, what I want. Often the disconnect is I don't feel like you're hearing me at all.
Mhm.
That often it's not about getting the answer you want, it's knowing that you were heard. And so many people who are disengaged, they're not saying I'm in disengaged because I don't every election doesn't go my way and I don't like this law. They often feel disengaged because, like, no, you're not even trying to hear me. You're not trying to meet me. I never see you, or you show up at my church when it's election time, but you never show up any other time.
Right.
You show up to ask me for a vote. You should have asked me for a contribution, but you're not in my community when I need the pothole fixed. You're not in my community when I don't feel safe.
Mhm.
And and so when we talk about, listen, because I'm a journalist, because I am somebody, I can get into a. I've been to city council meetings in Chicago, and watched when people who either have time or just have enough passion to get on the schedule and tell the mayor and the city council and the alderman, whoever's in the room, here's what I think, and this is what's wrong, and why you didn't do this, and this is your fault. And those people are obviously very engaged.
Mhm.
But there's a whole bunch of other people, like you said, that will never get into that room. That can't leave their job. They can't leave their kids. That don't even know the language that they would use to fill out whatever processes you got to use to be able to safely get into that room to say something. And technology, like politicking, like you said, removes that barrier. So at least I feel heard. And if I feel heard and nothing changes, that won't make me happy,
Hmm.
but it would make me less frustrated than if I can't even, I don't know their name because they don't know my name.
Right.
They
Right.
don't know me. So why do I care about them? They're not got to do with what I got to deal with here in Baltimore or here in Kansas, Kansas City or whatever. So I kind of want to, just get your take because when also you're a voter too.
Yeah.
You're a young voter.
Hmm.
There's things that you want personally, as a citizen. There are policies that you would support. And again, I just think about you and your peers and those that will come behind you, and what will we feel about democracy and our nation's ability to feel like we all have a stake in what's happening.
My hope is that we feel motivated. My hope is that we feel inspired. Unfortunately, though, Alfred, a lot of what I see from my peers in my community is a lot of I call them Twitter warriors, right? Um, very, very vocal on social media, very, very vocal online, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, very vocal, but aren't showing up at those meetings, maybe not even voting. And so those are the types of things that are extremely concerning because, those people have influence. Uh, Social media influencers, they are making tons of money now. They have huge audiences. And so the type of information that's being put out by those communities is something that we have to pay attention to because their followers and their listeners and their users are paying attention. People have tried to put, hip hop artists like a Cardi B and Quavo into a box. So they have no place in our, they have no place in politics. Or Megan Thee Stallion recently performed at Kamala's campaign launch. I think that's wrong, right? They do have influence. They have millions of followers that if they tell, hey, voting is cool, voting is important, voting is sexy, those people are going to embody that. When you look at someone like Quavo, whose nephew was killed due to gun violence, take off. That's a real issue that he's grappling with and trying to be more vocal on because he knows what happens at the federal level affects what happens in the streets of Atlanta. And we see those types of examples every day. We're all just everyday people, Alfred, with our own everyday issues that are trying to figure out solutions. And I can tell you one thing, if your name is not known, then you're going to have a lot of harder time solving your problems. If you are that person that keeps showing up at that city council meeting, I guarantee you your potholes getting fixed a little bit quicker than the neighbors. And that's just sheer fact of people do things for people that they know and that they care about, and also that they know have a big mouth. And so sometimes with people that have platforms like yourself, that's the way to get that attention, right? If you know that, okay, I need to get young people to vote, yeah, you have to come to the HBCUs and you have to have those tough conversations. And yeah, they might hold your feet to the fire. We know that neither candidates are perfect at any time. That doesn't matter what party you stand on. Everybody needs that accountability. And so I think that in a land of increased accountability, increased visibility, that's when we're going to start to see that traction take place.
I think it's also important as you talk about who gets to quote unquote be in politics or have influence in politics, and who shouldn't. And when we hear things like we heard a few years ago when during the pandemic, I believe a political media journalist told LeBron to shut up and dribble. Maybe it was a journalist, might have been a commentator. This idea that you're a basketball player, just shut up and play basketball. You're a female rapper, hip hop artist. Who are you doing? Trying to influence campaigns, but you draw that other point. Whatever influence you have, just the way if I am a Fortune 100 tech CEO who has influence because of both money and visibility, that we are all citizens. And whatever influence we can have on the process is part of our franchise as citizens, and whether I got influenced because I'm the lady in my town that's going to show up at the at the town hall meetings and raise cane every month. So you better okay. I don't. There are policies like I just don't want to.
Right.
Can you just take care of her stuff so she's not in my face?
Right.
Or whether you are Elon Musk and because you're wealthy and influential, yes, he can say, "No, I'm pushing this agenda."
Mm-hmm.
And I say all that to say that certainly as black and brown people, as women, we're almost made to feel like we're out of place if we speak too loud, if we assert ourselves, if we assert our influence, whether it's on a local level or a national level. And you make a great point. Meg the Stallion is a citizen.
Yeah.
She has influence.
Mm-hmm.
Just same thing with my girl, not my girl, but Amber
Amber Rose.
Amber Rose.
Yeah.
She neither of them should be. It's one thing to disagree with their positions or disagree with the candidates they support. It's another thing to say, why are you up there?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm up here because I have a voice. I've been invited. I'm going to use it
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a citizen and I can.
Absolutely.
And I think often, black and brown people and women in particular, in part because we do have prominence in sports and entertainment and popular culture, that we are still just gaining in corporate America. We have some black billionaires, but it's not like we got more than 10,
Right.
you
Right.
know. So we have to get in where we fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always telling people, don't feel like because you aren't this and you aren't that, and you didn't go to Harvard and you didn't go to Yale, you didn't study at the Kennedy Center, whatever, that you should be quiet. No, you shouldn't be quiet because your life is being affected just like everybody else's.
Be as loud as you can. And I think, with social media has come the democratization of access. You don't have to have gone to Harvard or Yale for your voice to matter. In fact, some of the people with the biggest followings may not have a degree at all. And that's now okay. It may not have been 50 years ago, but that's now okay. And I think we're seeing the dissipation of respectability politics, which is pretty cool to watch, actually. As a minority, I love seeing stuff like that because 50, 60, 100 years ago, our voices wouldn't have been taken seriously either. And so I love that we have platforms like this. We've created platforms for ourselves, like Politicking, like Beyond the Hype, that is elevating voices that we want to see in the community. And now we're able to do that with the click of a button, with the tap of on a screen. So I love that. I'm excited about that. I love to see my peers get excited about that. And millennials, Generation Zers, we are pivotal in this election. I don't tell people who to vote for, but I tell them to get out there and make sure your voice is heard, whatever that looks like to you. If it's voting, if it's campaigning, if it's donating, if it's talking to a friend, those are things that are very, very important. And so I'm excited to see what happens next in this 2024 cycle. It's a very stressful cycle, but it's an exciting one nonetheless.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I said, just, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm sure glad I'm here to see it. I mean, again, yeah, we each have our agendas, our politics, the things we prefer, the things we wouldn't prefer. But as an American citizen who's witnessing and has witnessed so much because change is happening so fast, my paternal grandfather passed away like 4 months before Barack Obama was
Um,
nominated
yeah.
as the Democratic nominee, and of course went on to become the first black president. And my grandfather was born in 1910, so he lived almost 99 years, and just barely. And now I'm like, we're not even 20 years later,
Hmm.
and now we're looking at the potential of a black multiracial woman president. And
Right.
the truth is, we thought the first woman president, we thought that the woman president alone was enough of a barrier.
Right.
And when Hillary Clinton didn't make it over the hump,
Hmm.
I'm like, well, it might be another generation
Right.
before we see a black woman, a black person, or a woman.
Right.
And here we are. It's only 2024, and so it's an exciting time. No matter, again, you're right. It's stressful. It's anxiety producing because we see things happening. Like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? But at the same time, always like I'm just glad I'm around it to see it and witness it and be a part of it
Yeah.
as an engaged citizen, no matter where the chips fall. And I have an enduring belief, and I know it was tested during the Civil War, and it was tested during the Civil Rights Movement, and yeah, it was tested during after 9/11. It was tested during COVID. That this is a resilient system. That the ideal of America is resilient. And while it stresses me out to see it tested the way it is sometimes, at the same time, it is always reassuring to me when we come out of it. And despite the losses, despite the casualties, despite the setbacks, despite the times when we're not exactly proud of the way we look as Americans, we're still standing and we're still moving forward. And that's in large part to young generations of every generation who said, yeah, but we can be better. We can do better. And as we close our conversation, I also want you to weigh in on what's a unique phenomenon, not only this election, but in American society, that this is more, when we talk about diversity, gender diversity, racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity, all different types of diversity, the biggest diversity or the most impactful one that I'm seeing is this multi-generational diversity, meaning now you have 4 and 5 generations of people engaged in the political process when for a long time it was maybe the two oldest
Hmm.
generations were engaged. And if you were between the ages of 18 and 30, you were like, I'll get around to it,
Hmm.
But now you literally, like you said, some of it is because of what we experienced during COVID and the murder of George Floyd, when literally, I mean, one of my youngest mentees just turned 18 and voted in her first election, and she was into it. Like, nah, I know this is my first one, but I'm doing this because I care.
Hmm.
And so as we wrap up, talk about the multi generational nature of the electorate and how politicians who can't appreciate that. I mean, there's a reason why Meg Thee Stallion wasn't just up there because she's a popular artist.
Hmm.
You got to have a way. If you're 50 or 60 years old as a candidate, you may not be the right person to actually carry the message to someone who is 20 or
Right.
25. But you can't dismiss that voter any more than you could dismiss, boomer voters who are also very influential as well.
No, I think it's really, really an exciting time. I want to see more people addressing that head on. And I love the fact that, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we were only seeing the, oldest electorate come out and vote. And we're seeing that change. It's not changed all the way yet, Alfred,
Yeah.
but it's coming. It's coming. And what we're seeing is young people getting more and more excited and at least popping their head around the river bend and say, okay, what's going on here? I think I might want to, maybe I don't know where to start. So you can start by downloading something like Politicking, but before they weren't even having those conversations. I always give this example. If you live in a area that's 90% black, but the 10% is Chinese, and the Chinese are the ones who come out to vote, that is what the agenda is going to look like, right? It doesn't matter how many of us there are if that population is not coming out to vote. And that's the way that I think, unfortunately, a lot of black and brown people have not started realizing yet. And that's why oftentimes when we're not seeing representation, it's because we're not getting out there and voting. And so think less about, okay, well, this is a black area. The people that are voting are the ones that have the seat at the table. And I think young people are starting to realize that. And even though we can't maybe yet run for president, we know we got an under baseline of 35. I think now we need to start looking at maybe a cap. We prior to President Joe Biden dropping out, we had two of the oldest elected officials running for office. And we got to think through that. We got to revisit things like that. We have still a Supreme Court where people die out. That those things that are inherently ageist, we are starting to really bite back at. And I think it's taken young people to realize that this isn't working for us anymore. So we have to make sure that we're being vocal about it. And maybe we can't run for president yet, but we can run for mayor. And maybe we can run for superintendent. And maybe we can run for city councilman or woman. And so those are the types of things that we're seeing now that are inspiring. We're seeing mayors that are 19 and 20 years old. We're seeing people that are just extremely young stepping into these formative roles and leading And so I'm so excited about that. I think it's going to continue. I think this is a upward trend in democracy right now. And no matter who wins, the goal is after November to stay engaged, to hold their feet to the fire, to make sure that we're calling them out on the things that they promised during their run for office. And so I'm excited to be part of that revolution and change. Politicking is excited to be on the political precipice of it as well. And I just can't wait to see what's to come. I'm really optimistic about the future of this country.
I share your optimism. You just reminded me we had the mayor of Baltimore on the stage, Mayor Scott at the Black Men Excel
Mhm.
year you went, and I just want to underscore just one of the points you just made. Yeah, we need to deal with something at the top when I'm again I'm a quote unquote older American,
Mhm.
and I'm looking at then nominee Biden and Trump, and I'm like I'm not saying you should be discriminated against because you're old, but
If we
you
have an
know
age bottom, we might need to consider
we
having.
have an age top,
Yeah.
but my other point is that to the degree that there is an age bottom, like you said, to run for president, there is almost no age bottom for those other positions, and Mayor Scott of Baltimore is an example of that. That we could do that now, and that could be obviously that's a important pool of talent for future presidential candidates.
Mhm.
But to encourage young people to say, not only should you be voting, you should be thinking about should I get on this school board or the city council, or and even if you run for the experience of running, that experience not only would enhance your level of engagement and influence in your local political community, but also my vision is that politicking will play a big role in training up not only engaged voters, but future generations of leaders who will start out earlier in the process of political discourse and leadership and training. And when I talk about training, not just candidates, people who work on campaigns, people who are there's a whole industry of careers that help drive the conversation that we only seem to focus on around presidential elections, but it's a year-round thing. And so I think you're doing just amazing work. Obviously, I believe in you and your company. So we're about to wrap this up. Homework assignment for everybody listening to this show.
Yep.
They need to download the Politicking app and encourage everyone else to do so.
Yep.
What else would you have the audience do um, uh, in addition to knowing where to follow you, knowing where to follow Politicking on social, whatever website, just give them whatever information they need to take action as a result to listening and
Absolutely,
learning from you.
absolutely. So, as Alfred said, please go ahead and download the app. Check us out, www.politickingapp.com. It's spelled just like it shows on my shirt. That's POLITICKING app.com. We're on our all social medias at Politicking or Politicking app. You'll be able to find us. And aside from following us, I want y'all to stay tuned in. I want y'all to come to the lives. I want to see y'all in the comments. I want to see you all asking questions. I want to see you sharing out the posts. I want people that are on fire for what is going to happen in this country. I think we need more people who are excited, who are buying into these conversations. I want to have more discourses like this with my family and my friends. And so don't be a stranger. We don't want you to just follow us. We want you to join the politicking family. And there's so many ways to do that. So find us on social media, find our website, download us, and please feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm so excited to be able to be a guest here today. And Alfred, this is just the first of many inspiring conversations that we'll have on Beyond the Hype and further.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to want to have you back after the election again, no matter which way it turns out, to talk and discuss what we learned about us. Because I think this election, I guess every election in a way is this is true, but this election more than any in my memory, maybe going back to Carter Reagan, is really a mirror to America deciding what kind of America we want to be and what direction do we want to go. The contrast is very stark between the candidates, the issues. It really is. We're going to send a message to ourselves about what kind of country we are choosing to be, at least in this moment. And so definitely I want to have you back on the show. So I'm not going to let you go before doing what every journalist does when they, in the world of politics, when they have a guest on the show and they want to put them on the spot.
Let's hear it.
So do you ever think you're going to run for office one day?
Wow, I get that question a lot. I used to say a really hard no, like, no, I'm not interested in that. But now I feel like I've gotten to the point where it's really whatever God has for me. I think right
Yes.
now what He has is me being a leader and steward of this really, really important, critical organization. And you never know when that may change. But for now, we're focused on educating people. We're focused on making sure that all of the information that's putting out there is verifiable, fact checked, and making sure that we're giving people another source of inspiration about the future of American politics.
Oh, you're a natural.
Oh, thanks, Alfred.
You say never say never, but let me tell you what my real agenda is.
You
Perfect.
can never say never. I hope to see you soon in Chicago. I'll probably be up there for DNC doing some coverage. So excited. Lock in with us on that as well. Politicking app. You'll see us out there.
Yep, actually a perfect reason to download the app now with the next major convention coming up. Listen, Wen-Kuni, I am so, you know how much, how much I think of you and what you're doing as a human being, in addition to being as an entrepreneur.
Thank you.
And I just thank you for taking the time on relatively short notice, because I asked you to be on the show when we were in San Francisco together
That's right.
only a couple of weeks ago. But thank you for joining me as my guest on Beyond the Hype.
My pleasure.
Okay, I promise and I delivered as usual. Another great edition of Beyond the Hype, another great guest, and of course, a very, very critically important topic at a critical time for our nation. So, listen, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President, Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. This has been another edition of Beyond the Hype. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.